Good evening and welcome to our event in the series Mind Your Head. This event tonight is called In for the Long Run, and we are going to say in a minute why. For those of you who have not been in these events before, this is a series of events that happen every month, more or less. They are run by Charing Cross Library, and the subject of these events is just to showcase the experience of people who have been practicing different events during the past year, during the COVID lockdowns, and they are telling us how they managed to adapt these hobbies and during the lockdowns, so they could keep practicing them, and how in turn these hobbies have helped them to cope with the stress and the social isolation that we have been experiencing for the last year. And Robert is here to talk to us about running, which is the theme of the event tonight. But before we start, I just want to remind everybody that if you have any questions that you want to put to Robert, we are going to answer them later on at the end of the event. You can write them on the Q&A in the questions and answers part through the event, and we are going to answer them at the end if we have time. And I think that's all I have to say for the time. For the time being. Well, so just to remind everybody as well that at the end of this event, and an email is going to be sent to everybody who has attended, and in that event will be some useful information that you may be interested in about this event. And also, we would be very grateful if you give us your opinion about what do you think about these events. Feedback is always very important, and put the information on our next event as well. And without any much ado, this is Robert here, and he's going to tell us about running. Have you been running for long?
Well, yes. I've never been particularly good at sports, so on the other hand, I thought it's important to keep fit. So from basically leaving university, I decided that I should run to keep fit. So I started running for a running club called the Bow Street Runners in the early 80s.
Just a moment, Bowie, you can show us the first slide if you want.
Yes, that's where it all started, and I found it very beneficial when I came to London as a means of meeting people, really, and it's a social activity which anyone can do, and that's just a very short run. I did 2.7 miles, a handicap, but yes, in that first year, that was my first trophy, as it were, which was for the most improved runner.
So that was the actual trophy?
Yeah.
And how did you go from 2 miles to a full marathon then?
Well, it was a long time before I did a marathon, and it wasn't my intention to do a marathon until a few years ago, because after doing a lot of running to start with, I then sort of graduated on to exercise in a gym, and I could afford to go to a gym. So it wasn't really until about 10 or so years ago, and I was just sitting at my desk at work, and an email popped up asking if anyone was interested in doing the New York Marathon. I assumed that there'd be lots of takers, so I just answered the email and say yes, in principle. And I got an email back to say that I got an entry. So then I thought I'd better start training for it.
Okay, can we see the second slide? Because we have the actual proof that you took part on that marathon.
Yes.
What's this?
In case people doubt it, the great thing about doing any sort of races, not just marathons, is that there's a lot of sort of collateral benefits to any particular race that you do. If you go and do the New York Marathon, then the next day in the New York Times, they publish the names of all the runners. So I went out to the stand, hobbled out to the stand after having done the marathon, bought myself a New York Times, and there's my name highlighted there. And that New York Times edition has been stuffed away in a drawer at home ever since, but I brought it along tonight.
And you've done other marathons since then, isn't it?
Yes.
And we have some slices of the other ones that you've done. What is the next one? Can we have the next? What is this?
This isn't a marathon. This was an 18K, which is a slightly unusual length of race. But again, it was abroad. It was in Italy. And it was a Chianti race, and quite a good fun run, as it were, as well as a serious race. It was in the Tuscan countryside, and the unusual thing about this race was that at each of the mile stops, there was a little glass of Chianti on offer.
Okay.
But I was too boring and too serious to entertain that, so I did it with a running group. But that's an example of a race that you can do, not necessarily a marathon abroad.
And the next slide is about...
Yeah, this is a marathon I did in Norway called the Midnight Sun Marathon. And I picked up a leaflet which is there to sort of give the flavour. As anyone who's been to Norway may know, it goes right up into the Arctic Circle, and the Midnight Sun Marathon takes place at Tromsø in the middle of June. So literally, middle of the year, they don't get any darkness at all. And so you're running at night. And it just appealed to me, the idea of doing such an unusual race. So there again, that's just an example of marathons that you can do.
And the next one is about...
Another one I did was in Chicago, which was very interesting to go there in order to, to see around Chicago as well as to actually do the race. Of course, a good way of seeing a city is to do a marathon, because the roads are all closed and you are running all around it. So I saw, just as in New York, I saw all of New York. I saw all of Chicago when I did the Chicago Marathon. And you find that a lot of people are turning up doing it on their own, really. Running is something which is more of a meeting your personal goals, your personal challenges. But it's also pleasing to do it with other people, a great crowd of people, and you get to meet people who are staying in the hotels about to do the marathon, or you meet them at the start line or the finish line. There's quite a lot of camaraderie amongst runners, even though it's quite a solo sport.
Okay, and have you done anyone in this country? All of them seem to be abroad. What is the next slide?
This is a photo that someone took of me doing the Stirling Marathon in Scotland. Again, I like to choose either marathons abroad or unusual marathons. So Stirling Marathon was a great one to do because the countryside is very beautiful. Scottish people are all out there to clap you on the way and to cheer you on the way with bagpipes in the case of Scotland. Yeah, so that was quite amusing. It involved running through Dunblane, which was interesting to see.
Okay, I think we have enough of slides for the moment. And so it seems as if you've been enjoying your marathons, but then last year there were no marathons. What happens last year then?
Well, I suppose the point I'd like to make is that I actually found that it was very useful to have had the hobby of running when we got to lockdown, because it also coincided with me moving into semi-retirement from a full-time job. So my initial plans of what I would do when I retire were rather pushed asunder. And there, in that scenario, you have quite a lot of time to fill. And what I found was that it was very beneficial to have a routine every day. So sometimes I didn't feel like running, I must admit, but it was something that I was used to the discipline of training for a marathon. So it was something that I did every day. I would put on the kit and put on the trainers and just go out there and run. And I must say that every time I went for a run, even if it didn't feel like going at the start of the run, I felt that I benefited from it when I got back.
Do you have a kind of routine that you like to do?
Yes, I have a standard run of a minimum of 7 miles. That a route that I do from outside the house around the new developments that are going on near where I live, which is quite interesting to watch going up around Vauxhall and Nine Elms. But that's the baseline, as it were, and then I try to deviate from that, increasing the run now and again by going on different routes. And it's interesting to sort of discover different parts of London. Every time you do a run, you discover something new. And to add to sort of how to get through lockdown, I suppose, what I found was I used to write down when I got back from the run how many miles I'd run and where I'd run. So I kept a sort of diary. But also, what I also found was a way of getting through the running, as it were, was I listened to the radio. I had a mobile radio, put in the earphones, and most people, I guess, would listen to music, and indeed I did listen to music. I found that motivational, but I also listened to talk radio, so I was sort of in tune with what was happening during lockdown by listening to phone-ins or listening to the news channels and so on, and I find that helpful and beneficial too.
Yes, and of course, getting out for exercise were one of the few things that we were allowed to do during the lockdowns. And even after the lockdowns were over, one of the few ways in which we could socialize with people were actually outdoors, while exercising. And I would like to say, if anyone is interested in starting running a bit, and for these people, the socializing and the meeting people is as important as the run itself. There is something called Park Run London or Park Run UK, which is basically a website. Just Google Park Run UK, and it will basically tell you all the different groups. There are basically different groups of people who meet usually every weekend in the local park to run together. And this website will tell you where is your nearest park run group. And it's not a club, it's not something you have to join, it's not anything you have to pay. You simply turn up there at the appointed place at the appointed time with your run shoes on and say hello and run with the people. Some people run faster, some people run slower, some people like to run together and chat, and some people like to socialize afterwards, some people just go home. But it's a nice way of getting out of the house, especially if you're not accustomed to running. And like me, a bit lazy when it comes to that. The fact that you have a particular appointment on a particular place and time with people sort of force you to go there. And as Robert says, you may not want to do it at the beginning, but after that, you feel much better for it. I mean, everyone knows that exercising, if it's paired up with a bit of socializing and a bit of mental stimulation, is the best thing. I would say there are the 3 pillars to keep us sane during the lockdowns were exercising, socializing, and mental stimulation. And many kinds of exercise, especially exercise that done in a group, do the three things at the same time, which is quite good. Yeah.
I think another point to make is that running isn't an expensive hobby. It's a good idea to get a good pair of trainers, but apart from that, it doesn't cost you a lot of money, like gym memberships and so on do. The only thing I would recommend is getting one of these Garmin watches or something like that, where you can keep track of your running experience. So not only do you know how far you've run, but you can record whether your time has improved from one run to another, and you can measure your heart rate and your body fat index and all these sort of things. And you can plug all that into, if you're minded to, I don't do this, but I know people who do plug all this into a computer and compare their results with others.
Of course, you don't have to be so competitive. You can just do it for fun. But if someone gets the little warm of running and want to get into know more about running and get into marathons, I think you have some books that you would like to recommend.
Yeah, I mean,
maybe we can see the next slide.
Yes. Can we just go back a slide?
Yeah.
I just wanted to sort of mention, I took this photograph from a book about marathons of the world, because I've been mentioning different marathons I've done abroad, such as New York and Chicago. But there are many different runs around the world, and this, I think, is a list of the 50 or so almost most unusual runs that you can do. You can do them in places like Tanzania, Kenya, Arizona, and so forth. When I did the New York Marathon, I met a lady whose ambition was to do a run in every state of the United States, which I don't think I'm going to get time to do. But there you can set your own targets. I mean, one interesting run which I would like to do once we're out of lockdown is the Great Wall of China marathon, for example.
Do you run along the actual wall?
I don't know. I need to look into it.
Okay.
Anyway, moving on to the next slide. What I found was in just preparing for this talk and bearing in mind that people who are listening to the talk will probably go to libraries and interested in libraries. You can probably pick up quite a lot of books about running. And I've just got together a few of them because what I found is that what I sort of experienced, the benefits I've been experiencing from running, particularly in lockdown, are actually something that other people feel as well, and a number of different books on the same sort of subject. So here's one, Keep on Running, The Highs and Lows of a Marathon Addict. If we could look at the next slide. That was the one I was referring to with the list of marathons of the world. If we look at the next slide. Mindful running. This is sort of an interesting topic of its own in how running can help you with mental illness, as seems to be the catchword of the moment. But it's true that you can get into a meditative state when you're running, and here's a whole book on that. And then the next slide. Interesting book written by the snooker player Ronnie O'Sullivan, who I didn't know he was a runner, but he's written about how it's helped him enormously in his life. And he writes that you need targets in order to get through life. So, and he's actually had quite a few suffered from quite a few different things in his life, and he was drug taking and alcohol addiction and so forth. But I haven't read the autobiography, but it looks an interesting one.
And I don't know if we have run out of slides at the moment. Perhaps we have. Yes?
Also, I just brought in a couple of books here as well on the subject of helping with mental health. There's a book by a lady called Belly Mackie, who's written a book called Jog On, and then another one called The Jog On Journal. And she writes quite movingly in these books about how she has found running has helped her with anxiety. And when she's talking about anxiety, she's not talking about the normal sort of anxiety which perhaps we all experience on a day-to-day basis. She's talking about clinical anxiety, where you don't know why you've got this feeling of anxiousness, but she's found that running has sort of been the way out of that for her.
Good. Yes, and we have run out of slides, and we are nearly running out of time. So I think it's perhaps time to move to the questions and answers. So if anyone had any questions for us, we are going to try to answer them for you. And I think someone has written, do you need to follow a special diet? I suppose if you want to run a marathon or something like that.
Yes, well, you don't have to, but it's a good idea, and there are books around that as well. But yes, before a marathon race, there's traditionally sort of pasta parties. If you go to most organized marathons, you'll find there's a pasta party the night before, because it's a good idea to stock yourself up with pasta. So yeah, I wouldn't be the expert on answering that, but I do know that because I follow my own routine in training for a marathon and so forth. But I do know that many books have been written about how to train for a marathon, including how to build up your experience and build down as you get closer to the marathon. The only technique that I followed was basically to keep every weekend making sure that I ran 1 mile further than I did the previous week, until I built myself up to actually run a marathon, as it were, before I got to the actual marathon, because I think that does give you confidence that you can actually run 26.2 miles before you actually start a marathon.
Okay. The next question is, have you ever injured yourself in a marathon?
No, I haven't injured myself in a marathon, and I think that's because it is important to train either by your own technique or follow, probably more sensible to follow a book, someone's advice, some specialist advice. But I haven't actually injured myself in a marathon. And I think another point to make actually is, when you do feel pretty exhausted as you come towards the end of the marathon, you do tend to hit the traditional wall when you get to about mile 20. And you really think, can I finish this? Can I carry on? And then it's a question of mental ability to sort of run through that wall. But when you stop, it's surprising how quickly you recover. You might feel exhausted for the first few minutes, but literally after about 5 minutes, you're through it.
And someone asked, have you ever tried barefoot running?
Yes, I tried barefoot running when I was on holiday, and having to keep up my running training routine. Barefoot running on the beach, on sand, but that's quite difficult, especially if it's wet sand.
Okay. There is another question. If you are listening to music on headphones, does it affect the rhythm or speed of your steps?
Yeah. Yes, it's actually, I was talking to someone earlier today about this, saying how I like to listen to particular types of music when I'm running. But the person I was speaking to actually said that he deliberately does not listen to music, because then it does get into, it doesn't help in the sense you're concentrating on the rhythm and getting yourself into a steady rhythm.
Okay. And would you consider taking part in the Ironman challenge? That's more than just running, isn't it?
I think I'll stick to at the age of 60. I think I'm reaching my limits.
What is your best mark? Your best time?
My best time was in Chicago when I did it in, see if I got it. Oh yes, another ancillary benefit of marathons is you get all these little medals and things to shove in the door when you get home. But this hasn't actually got my time on it, but I do remember it was 3 hours, 46 minutes and 45 seconds, which is okay. Many people run it faster. You get it in age groups. So it's quite rewarding to find your age-related place at the end of the marathon. Normally done it in 5-year bands, as it were.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Oh, we have a technical question. What, in your opinion, are the best running shoes?
Again, I'm not an expert really on that. I think the best thing to do is to go to a specialist running shop where they can measure the width, the length of your feet, how you run. They'll watch how you run and so forth and advise you. But whether or not some people, say it makes an enormous difference if you have the right running shoes. Certainly you want to get a good quality pair, but I'm afraid I haven't got the answer to that technical question myself. But again, many books I expect have been written about that.
Okay. If we have any more questions, I don't think we don't have any more. Yes. How would you recommend someone starts running? How would you recommend someone starts running?
Just to start running, really. This is particularly what this person, Belly Mackie, writes about. Perhaps if I just read a paragraph which explains this book, it might answer that question better than I can. She says, divorced and struggling with deep-rooted mental health problems, Bella Mackie ended her 20s in tears. She could barely find the strength to get off the sofa, let alone piece her life back together, until one day she did something she had never done willingly before. She pulled on a pair of trainers and went for a run.
Yeah.
So just get the trainers, just go for a run. And you'll find, I read the first chapter of the book, and that first run was a very short one. Maybe it was 5 minutes. But the next day, the run was a little bit more. She surprised herself. And before long, it was exponential. Before long, she was running for an hour or so, and then more and more.
Okay. What was your favorite moment in any of the marathons you have done? The finish line, but thank God it's all over, no?
No, I think the New York Marathon was the most amazing one because I was very impressed with the way the Americans have such a way of cheering the runners on. There's no sort of irony as to why you're doing this. They were all out there in the different parts of New York cheering on in their different ways. So it was enjoyable, for example, running through the Bronx, which is supposed to be quite a rough part of New York, and that was at about the 20-mile length when you're really feeling at your worst. And then there were signs up saying, you better keep on running, you're in the Bronx. So that was a bit that cheered me up.
Do you think running has helped your mental health?
Well, I think it has, because I didn't really find lockdown too much of a struggle. And I think that's because running took up quite a lot of my time. I felt I was achieving something from it. I was trying to keep myself fit, ready so that I could do a marathon. And as I said earlier, it just gave me a routine. And I find that that's very important.
Mm-hmm. And there are no more questions, and I'm afraid we have reached our limit. These events, we try to keep them short and sweet, and our half hour is over. So it just left for us to say thank you very much to everyone who has attended this event. Look out for the email that you're going to receive sometime after this event from Helen. Thank you about this event, asking you for your feedback and giving you the date for our next event, which is going to be at the end of June next month.
Mm-hmm. And we're now going to get onto the magic carpet and whisk away.
Well, yes, that's what is left for us to do now. So I think it's all left for us to say. So thank you very much for coming, and see you next time.